The meteor shower wasn't supposed to happen tonight. Kai pressed his eye against the telescope's eyepiece, adjusting the focus with practiced precision. The Perseids had peaked 3 weeks ago, yet streaks of light tore across the August sky like silver tears. His weathered hands moved across the control panel of the remote observatory, recording each anomalous entry into Earth's atmosphere. At 34, Kai had spent more nights alone under these stars than he cared to count. The isolation suited him. No bureaucrats questioning his research, no colleagues stealing credit for his discoveries. Just him, the cosmos, and the endless dance of celestial bodies that never disappointed him the way people did. The explosion shattered his solitude. A brilliant flash erupted over the northern ridge, close enough that the shock wave rattled the observatory's reinforced windows. Kai's coffee mug toppled, spilling across his logbooks as emergency alerts flooded his communication array. Military frequencies crackled to life, barking coordinates and deployment orders. Unknown craft down. In Sector 7, all units converge on signal location. Kai's blood chilled. Sector 7 bordered his property line. He grabbed his emergency kit and ATV keys, racing through the pine forest toward the crash site. Smoke guided him through the darkness, thick and acrid with the smell of burning metal and something else. Something organic that made his stomach lurch. The wreckage lay scattered across a small clearing, twisted fragments of what might have been a spacecraft glowing with residual heat. But it was the figure slumped against a boulder that made Kai's breath catch. She couldn't have been more than 16, her small frame wrapped in what remained of a silver bodysuit. Her skin held an ethereal pallor, almost luminescent in the firelight, and her hair fell in dark waves around delicate features that were hauntingly human yet subtly wrong. Her ears curved to gentle points, and when she stirred at his approach, her eyes opened to reveal irises of startling violet. Blood, crimson like his own, seeped from a gash across her forehead. "Please," she whispered in accented English, her voice carrying a musical quality that resonated in his chest. They will dissect me." Kai knelt beside her, his engineering mind cataloging her injuries while his heart hammered against his ribs. First contact protocols demanded he report this immediately. The government would want her secured, studied, interrogated. But looking into those frightened violet eyes, all he could think of was his sister at that age, vulnerable, terrified, trusting him to protect her. "Can you walk?" he asked quietly. She tried to stand but collapsed against him, her slight weight surprisingly warm. Without thinking, Kai scooped her into his arms, surprised by how easily she fit against his chest. Her head lolled against his shoulder, and he felt the rapid flutter of her pulse against his throat. Military helicopters thundered overhead as he carried her back through the forest. Their searchlights swept the trees, missing his dark ATV by mere yards as he drove the hidden service roads back to his observatory. In his small medical bay, equipped for the inevitable accidents of remote living, Kai cleaned her wounds with gentle hands. She drifted in and out of consciousness, murmuring words in a language that sounded like wind chimes and distant music. "What's your name?" he asked as she stirred. "Vera," she whispered, her violet eyes focusing on his with startling intensity. "And you are kind. I can feel it." Outside, the helicopters circled like hunting wolves, their rotors beating a rhythm of approaching danger. For 3 days, Vera existed in a fever dream of half-consciousness, while military search teams combed the forest. Kai watched her from his chair beside the narrow cot he'd moved into the observatory's storage room, the only space without windows, where her presence wouldn't be detected by thermal imaging. When the fever finally broke on the 4th morning, she woke to find him slumped over his laptop, exhausted from monitoring both her condition and the military communications. Her movement stirred him awake, and their eyes met in the dim light filtering through the ventilation shaft. "You stayed," she whispered, her voice stronger now but still carrying that otherworldly musical quality. "Where else would I go? This is my home." Kai stretched his cramped neck, noting how her violet eyes seemed to catch and hold what little light existed in the room. "How do you feel?" "Different." She sat up slowly, testing her balance. "The pain is Muted. Your medicine? Partly. He handed her a protein bar and water bottle. Your people heal faster than humans, I think. The gash on your forehead is barely a scar now. She touched the spot reflexively, then looked at him with an intensity that made his breath catch. You could have turned me in. Your government would have rewarded you greatly. Some things are worth more than money. The words came out rougher than he intended, carrying years of disappointment in his own species. Over the following days, as the military search gradually moved to other sectors, Vera began to emerge from the storage room for longer periods. She moved with an otherworldly grace as if gravity affected her differently, and Kai found himself watching her navigate his small living space with fascination. "What is this?" she asked one evening, stopping before his old piano in the corner. "Music. Well, it makes music when you press the keys," he demonstrated with a simple melody, self-conscious about his rusty skills. "I used to play more before." She placed her fingers beside his on the keys, her touch feather-light. When she pressed down, the notes that emerged seemed to resonate with harmonics that shouldn't have been possible from the old instrument. The sound made his chest tighten with unexpected emotion. "Your heart is heavy," she said quietly, not looking at him. "I can feel it. Like a stone inside you." "Feel it? My people. We sense emotions the way you see colors. Yours are very deep, very old." Her fingers found another melody, this one haunting and beautiful. "Someone hurt you badly." Kai's hands stilled on the keys. "My wife, Elena, she died 2 years ago. Cancer." "You loved her completely." It wasn't a question, and somehow that made it easier to nod. "We were going to start a family, had all these plans." He trailed off, surprised by how easily the words came with Vera. "The doctors said the treatment was working, right up until it wasn't." Vera turned to face him fully, and he was startled to see tears in her violet eyes. "Loss carves spaces in our hearts that never heal, but sometimes those spaces can hold new love." Before he could respond, she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his, a gesture that felt both alien and intimately familiar. Warmth spread through him, not just physical but emotional, as if she were sharing some of her strength. "What are you?" he whispered. "Alone. Like you," she replied, her breath warm against his skin. "My ship was fleeing. My world. It burns. Now. Your people and mine, we are at war. Then why help me understand your feelings?" "Because," she pulled back to meet his eyes, "understanding is how wars end." That night, as she curled up on the cot and he settled into his chair to keep watch, Kai realized the constant ache in his chest had lessened for the first time since Elena's death. Outside, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the two lost souls who had found each other in the darkness. 3 weeks passed in a stolen paradise of hushed conversations and growing intimacy. Vera had taken to helping Kai with his astronomical observations, her innate understanding of celestial mechanics far surpassing his years of study. She would curl against his side as he worked, her head resting on his shoulder while she traced constellation patterns on his forearm with gentle fingers. "Your touch is different now," she murmured one evening, her violet eyes reflecting the starlight, streaming through the observatory's dome, less guarded. Kai's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining with practiced ease. "You've changed me. I didn't think that was possible anymore. Hearts that have been broken know how to heal others." She turned in his arms, her face inches from his. "Kai, I need to tell you something." The seriousness in her tone made his stomach clench. "What is it?" "My people. They will come for me soon. I can feel them searching, getting closer." Her hand pressed against his chest over his heart. "When they arrive, I have to go with them." "No." The word came out harsher than he intended. "You're safe here. We can hide you better, move you somewhere." "Kai." Her voice carried a finality that silenced his protests. My ship's distress beacon has been transmitting since the crash. It's taken them this long to trace because of the interference from your military's jamming, but they're close now. He pulled her closer, desperate to memorize the feel of her against him. Over the past weeks, their relationship had deepened beyond mere companionship. Late nights had been filled with stolen kisses and whispered confessions, her alien grace teaching him that love could exist in forms he'd never imagined. "What if I came with you?" Vera's expression crumpled. "Your body couldn't survive the journey. Our ships, our worlds, they're not made for human physiology." That night they made love with the desperation of the condemned. Vera's touch was electric, her empathic abilities allowing her to feel his emotions as intensely as her own. She guided him with whispered words in her musical language, their bodies moving together in a harmony that transcended species. When release finally claimed them, Kai felt as if their souls had touched across the vast emptiness between stars. In the quiet afterward, as she traced patterns on his chest with trembling fingers, Vera began to cry. "I never expected to feel this," she whispered against his skin. "My people don't form bonds like humans do. What we have, it's unprecedented." The rescue ship arrived 3 days later, its arrival heralded by a low humming that seemed to emanate from the Earth itself. Kai watched through the observatory's main window as a craft of impossible beauty settled into the clearing where Vera's escape pod had once lain burning. Vera stood beside him, now dressed in a fresh silver suit that her rescuers had provided. She looked ethereal, otherworldly, a reminder that she had never truly belonged to his world. "I have to go," she said, though her voice broke on the words. Kai turned to face her, memorizing every detail of her alien features. "Will I ever see you again?" She stepped closer, placing both hands on his chest over his heart. Her touch sent warmth spreading through him, but this time it felt different, deeper, more permanent. "I promise you this," she said, her violet eyes locked on his. "I will find a way to come back. And when I do, I will bring you something beyond human dreams, something that will heal the deepest wound in your heart." Before he could ask what she meant, she kissed him one final time. The kiss tasted of starlight and impossible promises, of love that transcended the boundaries of worlds. Then she was gone, walking across the moonlit clearing toward her rescue ship. Kai watched from the window until the craft disappeared into the star-filled sky, leaving him alone once more with only the memory of violet eyes and a promise that seemed too beautiful to be real. 10 years crawled by like wounded animals. Kai, now 44, had grown thinner, more angular, as if grief were slowly carving him away from the inside. Silver threaded through his dark hair, and lines mapped the corners of his eyes, evidence of countless nights spent scanning the stars for signs that would never come. The observatory had become both sanctuary and prison, filled with the ghosts of laughter that no longer echoed in its halls. He'd tried to move on. There had been other women, colleagues from conferences, a kind librarian from town, even a widow, who understood loss. But every relationship withered under the weight of his divided heart. How could he explain that he was still waiting for someone who might not even exist anymore? That he still woke some nights reaching for skin that glowed, like starlight? The world had changed around him. The war with Vera's people had ended in an uneasy truce, first contact protocols rewritten, and humanity slowly adjusting to the reality that they were no longer alone in the universe. Trade agreements and cultural exchanges had replaced missile strikes and orbital bombardments. Yet for all the progress, Kai felt more isolated than ever. On this particular October night, rain lashed against the observatory's dome as he calibrated his equipment. The storm had knocked out power to half the county, leaving him running on backup generators. He was adjusting the radio telescope's frequency when the signal came through. At first he thought it was interference, a rhythmic pulse that seemed almost musical. But as he fine-tuned the receiver, his breath caught. The Khoi pattern was familiar, hauntingly so. It matched the cadence of Vera's native language, the same melodic rise and fall he'd memorized during those precious weeks a decade ago. His hands shook as he traced the signal's origin. It was coming from directly overhead. Through the rain-streaked dome, a soft blue light began to descend. Not the harsh glare of military craft or the chaotic burn of meteors, but something gentle, deliberate. As it settled into the clearing beyond his windows, Kai's legs nearly gave out. The ship was different from the one that had taken Vera away. Smaller, more elegant, with graceful curves that suggested it was built for stealth rather than rescue. As its door opened with a whisper of displaced air, a figure emerged. She moved with the same otherworldly grace he remembered. But everything else had changed. Vera was no longer the frightened girl who'd crashed into his world. She stood tall, now her bearing confident and regal. Her silver suit had been replaced by robes that seemed to shimmer with their own inner light, and her dark hair was longer, adorned with what looked like crystalline ornaments that caught and refracted the ship's glow. But her eyes, those impossible, violet eyes, remained exactly as he remembered. Kai stumbled to the door, his heart hammering so hard he feared it might burst. When he opened it, they stood facing each other across 10 years of separation, both changed by time and loss, but somehow still recognizably themselves. "Hello, Kai," she said, and her voice was deeper now, touched with an authority that hadn't existed before. "I told you I would return. He swallowed hard, unable to form words. "I thought you were dead. Or that you'd forgotten." "Forget?" She stepped closer, and he could see tears gathering in her eyes. "I have crossed half the galaxy to keep my promise to you. I could no more forget you than I could forget how to breathe." The years seemed to collapse between them. He wanted to reach for her, to pull her into his arms and confirm that she was real, but something in her posture held him back. She carried herself like someone who had seen terrible things, done terrible things, perhaps. There was a weight, too, her presence that hadn't existed before. "You've changed," he said quietly. "As have you." Her gaze traced the lines on his face, the silver in his hair. "You look tired, my love, worn down by waiting." 10 years, Vera. 10 years of wondering if I'd imagined everything. She nodded, pain flickering across her features. "I know. The war, it lasted longer than anyone expected, and when it ended, there were other responsibilities. My people needed me to help negotiate the peace treaties, to serve as a bridge between our species." She reached into her robes and withdrew a small crystalline orb that pulsed with soft inner light. "But I never forgot my promise." Kai stared at the orb in Vera's hands, mesmerized by the way it seemed to contain swirling galaxies of light. "What is it?" "Something my people call a memory weaver," she said, her voice soft with reverence. "It took me 8 years to create this one. Years of learning our most advanced technologies. Years of searching through the quantum echoes that linger in places where intense emotions were felt." She stepped closer, and he could smell the familiar scent of ozone and starlight that always surrounded her. "During the war, when despair threatened to consume me, I would remember you speaking of Elena. The love in your voice when you said her name, the way your whole being seemed to dim when you told me she was gone." Her fingers traced the orb's surface, and it pulsed brighter. "I realized that while I couldn't bring her back, I might be able to give you something else." "Vera, I don't understand." "Elena lived in your home for 3 years, she interrupted gently. "Every conversation, every laugh, every whispered endearment between you left quantum impressions in the very atoms of this place. My technology can read those impressions, reconstruct them into something you can experience again." Kai's breath caught. "You mean?" "I mean that inside this orb are the echoes of every moment you shared with her. Not just images or sounds, but the full sensory experience. Her touch, her scent, the exact timbre of her voice when she told you she loved you." Vera's voice broke slightly. "It won't bring her back, but it will let you be with her again, whenever. You need to remember." The weight of what she was offering hit him like a physical blow. All those nights he'd lain awake trying to recall the exact sound of Elena's laughter, the precise way she hummed while cooking, the feeling of her hand in his. It could all be his again. "Why?" he whispered. "Why would you do this? You could have come back with nothing, and I would have been grateful just to see you again." Vera set the orb gently on the table between them and took his hands in hers. Her touch was warm, familiar despite the years of separation. "Because I love you," she said simply, "and loving someone means wanting to heal their deepest wounds, even if it costs you everything." "What do you mean, costs you everything?" She looked away, and he saw the pain she'd been hiding behind her composed exterior. "Creating this required me to sacrifice my position among my people, my status, my future. The technology is forbidden, considered too dangerous, too tempting. When they discovered what I was doing, I was exiled." She met his eyes again, and he saw the old vulnerability he remembered from their first meeting. "I have nowhere else to go. Vera." He reached for her, pulling her against his chest. She felt smaller than he remembered, more fragile, as if the weight of her sacrifice had diminished her somehow. "You gave up everything. For me. For love," she corrected, her face buried against his shoulder. "For the chance that maybe, just maybe, you might have room in your heart for both your past and your future." They held each other in the rain-lashed observatory, two beings from different worlds bound together by loss and hope. Finally, Kai pulled back to look at her face. "Show me," he said quietly. Vera nodded and picked up the orb. As her fingers activated hidden controls, the device began to glow more brightly. The air around them shimmered, and suddenly Elena was there. Not a ghost or a hologram, but present in every way that mattered. She sat at the piano, her auburn hair catching the afternoon light as she played the melody that had been their song. Kai could smell her lavender perfume, could see the way she bit her lower lip when concentrating. When she looked up and smiled at him, the same radiant smile that had first stolen his heart, he felt tears streaming down his face. "Hello, my love," Elena said, her voice exactly as he remembered. "I've missed you so much." Kai reached out with trembling hands, and impossibly, he could touch her. Her skin was warm, real, and when she stood to embrace him, he felt complete for the first time in 12 years. They spent an hour together, Elena sharing memories he'd forgotten, playing music that filled the observatory with joy, simply existing in the space they'd once shared. When the memory finally faded, leaving him gasping with the intensity of it, Vera was there to catch him. "She's beautiful," Vera whispered, tears in her own eyes. "I can see why you loved her so completely." Kai looked at the woman who had sacrificed everything to give him this gift. Vera's violet eyes held no jealousy, no regret, only love deep enough to encompass his past, his pain, and his future. "I did love her completely," he said, taking Vera's face in his hands. "Just as I love you completely now. Not instead of her, but alongside her. Love isn't finite, Vera. It multiplies." When he kissed her, it tasted of salt tears and starlight, of promises kept and new beginnings. Outside, the storm began to clear, revealing the vast tapestry of stars that had brought them together across impossible odds. In the days that followed, Vera would share the memory weaver's gift with him sparingly, precious moments with Elena to be treasured, but not lived in. And he would show Vera that Earth could be home to two people who had found each other not once but twice, proving that some love stories are written in the stars themselves. He saved her life. She gave him back the part of his heart he thought was lost forever. And in return, he gave her a new world to call home. The same melodic rise and fall he'd memorized during those precious weeks a decade ago. His hands shook as he traced the signal's origin. It was coming from directly overhead. Through the rain-streaked dome, a soft blue light began to descend, not the harsh glare of military craft or the chaotic burn of meteors, but something gentle, deliberate. As it settled into the clearing beyond, his windows, Kai's legs nearly gave out. The ship was different from the one that had taken Vera away. Smaller, more elegant, with graceful curves that suggested it was built for stealth rather than rescue. As its door opened with a whisper of displaced air, a figure emerged. She moved with the same otherworldly grace he remembered, but everything else had changed. Vera was no longer the frightened girl who'd crashed into his world. She stood tall now, her bearing confident and regal. Her silver suit had been replaced by robes that seemed to shimmer with their own inner light, and her dark hair was longer, adorned with what looked like crystalline ornaments that caught and refracted the ship's glow. But her eyes, those impossible, violet eyes, remained exactly as he remembered. Kai stumbled to the door, his heart hammering so hard he feared it might burst. When he opened it, they stood facing each other across 10 years of separation, both changed by time and loss, but somehow still recognizably themselves. "Hello, Kai," she said, and her voice was deeper now, touched with an authority that hadn't existed before. "I told you I would return." He swallowed hard, unable to form words. "I thought you were dead, or that you'd forgotten." "Forget?" She stepped closer, and he could see tears gathering in her eyes. "I have crossed half the galaxy to keep my promise to you. I could no more forget you than I could forget how to breathe." The years seemed to collapse between them. He wanted to reach for her, to pull her into his arms and confirm that she was real, but something in her posture held him back. She carried herself like someone who had seen terrible things, done terrible things perhaps. There was a weight to her presence that hadn't existed before. "You've changed," he said quietly, "as have you." Her gaze traced the lines on his face, the silver in his hair. "You look tired, my love, worn down by waiting." 10 years, Vera. 10 years of wondering if I'd imagined everything. She nodded, pain flickering across her features. "I know. The war. It lasted longer than anyone expected, and when it ended, there were other responsibilities. My people needed me to help negotiate the peace treaties, to serve as a bridge between our species." She reached into her robes and withdrew a small crystalline orb that pulsed with soft inner light. "But I never forgot my promise."